since it was created in 1950. And even before that, as we know, in the era of the Grand Prix, Formula One has already raced on dozens of circuits. And if we multiply that by the number of variations for each of them, that number would get close to 100. From what I've seen here, there are 77 venues, but, for example, Barcelona has about half a dozen different layouts, and so does Magna-Acauas. Interlagos has at least 3, the old, the new, and the new one with a slight renovation where Laranjinha was changed. So you can see things keep changing. Spa-Francorchamps doesn't have the 14-kilometer layout and the current one. The current one has already undergone several changes, with 3 or 4 different layouts at the bus stop and so on. It's madness. And then, over time, we've seen some rather uninspired circuits, which often hosted Formula One for reasons that only money and nothing but money can explain. So I've put together a list of 10 of those lamentable ones, and you need to know about them. Before hosting Formula One, a street circuit near the sea, Valencia had already seen racing cars and many editions of MotoGP at the permanent Ricardo Tormo circuit, which is still there today. Several pre-season tests were held on that track, so when people said, Formula One is going to Valencia, a lot of people thought, I get it. It'll be at the circuit, but it wasn't. The 5.4-kilometer track was built near the port area, also close to the City of Arts, a part of the city they wanted to develop, and when someone wants to develop an area, you know there's always a bit of property speculation behind it, campaign donations, in short, a bit of dodginess. There were 25 corners, 5,419 meters, and the layout featured several high-speed bends, which was part of an attempt to move away from the idea that city circuits had to be slow and twisty. But right from the start, the track was criticized for being too narrow to encourage overtaking and too wide to feel challenging like a proper street circuit. People are never satisfied, and it might seem like heresy for me to start my list with the circuit where Brazilians won in the first 2 editions. Felipe Massa in 2008, Rubens Barrichello with Brawn in 2009, his first win that year and the penultimate victory for Brazil, at least so far, in Formula One. The project cost approximately €98 million in 2013, and right after the Formula One contract ended, which lasted until 2012, allegations of corruption led some local figures to jail. I've been to Valencia. That area is abandoned. You can't even get there properly. And I have a dear friend who lives nearby, cheers to Paulo, who tells me this whole thing is a joke in the city, like some project in your town that never got finished, and a few here in mine as well. Best not to say anything, so as not to make enemies for no reason. Approved. The truth is, the track never really produced great races, and perhaps the most remarkable and notorious moment was that near loop by Mark Webber when he hit a sign in 2010. Remember? The Yeongam International Circuit in South Korea is another one of those tracks that never really excited anyone. And I'll tell you something else. When I played it on the simulator, I couldn't wait for that wretched race to be over. Especially because this nerd here used to race the full 100% distance. Located 300 kilometers from Seoul, the country's capital, the plan was for the whole area around the circuit to be developed. In fact, during the first edition in 2010, there were construction cranes on the horizon. The project cost $400 million and combined permanent sections, which would be used only for the circuit, with roads that would be open to traffic, as if it were part residential complex and part permanent racetrack. However, the layout, with 5,615 meters and 18 corners, never won the drivers' hearts. The problems began right from the first edition, with chronic finishing flaws in the runoff areas and the pit building, as well as extremely low attendance, since the track was located in a remote area and Formula One had not been properly introduced to the South Korean public. All of this even affected the television experience, with FOM instructing camera operators to use tight shots that wouldn't show the half-empty grandstands. There were only 4 editions, 10, 11, 12, and 13. In 2014, Formula One didn't return there. Bernie Ecclestone certainly pocketed some money, and today the circuit is abandoned. The Sochi circuit is considered by many Formula One fans to be the worst track the category has ever set foot or tires on to this day. Perhaps the only person who would disagree with that is Valtteri Bottas, who always did very well there. The track was built around the Sochi Olympic Park, which hosted the 2014 Winter Olympics, and at 5,848 meters, it never managed to overcome fundamental design flaws. Design in the sense of creating a track with even a hint of personality, of soul, with very long straights, several 90-degree corners in exhaustingly slow sections, and parts where dirty air had a devastating effect on the possibility of someone following another to attempt an overtake. The circuit had one corner, turn 2, described by George Russell as the worst on the entire calendar. Which one is turn 2? Let me see. Formula One raced there for 8 seasons, and in almost all those editions, the only kind of overtaking we saw happened through strategy in the pits. And the only good racing moment that comes to mind, searching my memory, might be the storm that snatched away Lando Norris's first victory, remember? In 2021, or Daniel Kvyat hitting the back of Sebastian Vettel, who went absolutely mad with rage. Other than that, really very bland. The Phoenix track in Arizona, a street circuit, hosted Formula One on 3 occasions: 89, 90, and 91, 2 of them won by Ayrton Senna, and it was yet another track in Formula One's huge crusade to become popular in Uncle Sam's land. I've mentioned it here before, but Formula One had already been trying to make it work over there, racing at Watkins Glen, Sebring, Riverside, then in Detroit, Long Beach, Dallas, and then the attempt was Phoenix, and once again, it didn't work out. In this case, 3 more times. The city center was turned into a track. Well, calling it a track is being generous, really. A few straights connected by a bunch of corners, 90-degree bends with no personality, no challenge, and one of the biggest problems for anyone going to watch the race was the complete lack of visibility. You could only see the cars as they passed right in front of you, something that, for example, is the complete opposite at Interlagos, where you can see almost 70% of the lap. Between 89, 90 and 91, the track changed layout in an attempt to salvage something, but then after 91, Bernie Ecclestone, who was making money from it, abruptly pulled the plug without any explanation and took Formula One away. It seems that even he didn't like Phoenix. Officially known as the Tanoka International Circuit AIDA, the track that hosted the so-called Pacific Grand Prix twice in 94 and 95 is perhaps one of the most, shall we say, unsuccessful experiments or ventures in Formula One history. The track was built for the wealthy, a private circuit costing $100 million, located 12 miles from the nearest small town. It's an 8-hour drive from Tokyo, or a day and 12 hours by train. That's ridiculously far, isn't it? 629 kilometers. The main problem with the track wasn't exactly the circuit itself, which did offer some technical challenge, but rather its complete inaccessibility. I remember reading on Flavio Goma's blog, where he said that the first time they arrived there in 94, the track had no reference at all for Formula One, and inside the control tower there was a lap time written down that Mr. Tanoka, the circuit's builder, had set with the car he bought to drive on his own track. The remote location made everything extremely difficult. The spectators, the teams, and the television crews all had a hard time getting there. The circuit is listed here as 94 and 95, but in reality, it only hosted a single Grand Prix, the one where Rubens Barrichello got his first podium and Schumacher took the win, on that day when Senna was hit at the start by Nicola Larini and Mika Häkkinen. The 1995 race was scheduled, but it was cancelled because of the earthquake in the city of Kobe, which severely affected the region's infrastructure, making the race impossible. And so, it ended up being a one-off, never to return. I looked it up here and, according to the internet, the Aida track still hosts races from various Japanese categories, such as Super GT, and it has been bought and is now called the Okayama Circuit. The Yas Marina circuit made its Formula One debut in 2009, taking away from Interlagos the spot to close the championship. I've always said here, and the British press agrees, Interlagos deserves a place of honor. It should open and close the calendar, but in the end, it's all about the money. Abu Dhabi paid up, built a lavish circuit, and today hosts the championship finale, and has done so since 2009. Let's be honest, Abu Dhabi's track was a right pain at first. It went through a few changes and, from 2021 onwards, became a bit more flowing, but that first version was unbearable. I remember playing it on the simulator. It made me want to die. In the first layout, in that stadium section where Verstappen overtook Hamilton in 2021, the track wasn't like that. There was a chicane leading into that hairpin. What a nightmare. And then, at the end of the second back straight, it wasn't that banked corner either, but rather an unbearable sequence of chicanes. For more than a decade, the track was consistently the leader among the most hated. It produced boring races and must still give nightmares to a certain Fernando Alonso, remembering the rear of that yellow Renault of Vitaly Petrov that he couldn't get past, and because of that, lost a championship to Sebastian Vettel. The changes that came in 2021 significantly improved things, although I haven't yet had the chance to try it out on the simulator. The Circuito del Jarama, which is named after a river that runs through the region around Madrid, continuously hosted Formula One for 14 consecutive seasons between 68 and 81. And despite lasting for so long, it's remembered by those who followed Formula One back then for offering rather dull races. The layout was 3,404 meters long with 13 corners, and perhaps it was better suited to a national category, like those that race here in Brazil, touring 1.4 and so on, being a bit short and tight for Formula One, even for the Formula One of the early 80s. This made it a tight circuit, like an away match in the Libertadores, a scrappy 1-0 game where nothing happens unless the ball is moving. You know what I mean? Because of that, the starting position, just like on a street circuit, had a disproportionate impact on the result. The infrastructure problems, even for that era of Formula One at the start of its professionalization, were glaring, making things difficult for those working, those driving, and even for the fans, who just couldn't wait for the race to be over. The most memorable memory from there is precisely from the last edition, in 1981, when Gilles Villeneuve, thanks to the tight layout, managed a heroic victory by defending the lead for 68 laps, with no one able to overtake him. The first appearance of Formula One in Texas in 1994, racing on the streets of a park in Dallas, was traumatic and disastrous, with the asphalt coming loose from the ground, and the trauma was so great that Formula One would only reappear there, in Texas, in 2012, in Austin. The disaster was so severe that on the race weekend, it was almost cancelled. The extreme heat caused pieces of the asphalt to give way under the grip of the car's tires, and it started to crumble. Hours before the race, emergency repairs were carried out, which meant the warm-up was cancelled, and in that heat, perhaps no one needed a warm-up anyway. Bit of a daft joke, right? But anyway, you get what I mean. Air temperatures above 40 degrees, imagine what it was like on the track. Engines were overheating, And there was that iconic scene of Nigel Mansell pushing his Lotus until he collapsed at the side of the track. Everything went wrong, to the point that the legendary Carroll Shelby, one of the race organizers, said, "Dallas was the worst track we've ever had." The 1985 round even showed up on some provisional Formula One calendars for the following year, but was later scrapped, and Formula One in Dallas would move to Detroit in yet another attempt to gain popularity in the United States. The Hungaroring circuit made its first appearance in Formula One in 1986, marking the category's first foray on the other side of the Iron Curtain. And you might be thinking, how come you're including a track that's currently in Formula One and, as you said, has been producing good races not that long ago? Yes, that's true. I haven't forgotten. But the fact is that the first version of Hungaroring was widespread. I'll ask the editor to show you here the difference between the current version, with an extended straight and fewer chicanes, especially one that used to be after turn 3, which made the track extremely tight. And bear in mind, it's already a tight circuit these days. The 1986, 1987, and 1988 editions were raced on this layout. Then, in 2002, a new change extended the main straight and also the straight at the back, making the corners sharper, adding more flat-out sections, and with that, improving overtaking opportunities. But the first version of Hungaroring was rubbish. Formula One has been racing in Las Vegas since 2023, Rodrigo. So, what are you on about? Well, it's just that before that, it had gone through a temporary circuit inside a hotel car park and raced there twice, in 81 and 82. It's the most extreme and clear-cut example of how the ambition to make a few dollars and Ecclestone's desperation to popularize, I've said this before, Formula One in the United States could lead to, and did lead to, very poor decisions. In 81 and 82, Formula One ended its seasons racing in Las Vegas. The circuit was 3,650 meters long, had 14 corners, and ran anti-clockwise. And the layout basically consisted of a series of straights connected within the loops of a car park, like those at shopping centers, supermarkets, or, in this case, a hotel. It looked more like one of those indoor karting tracks you find in shopping centers. A layer of asphalt was laid over the concrete, a very smooth asphalt that offered almost no grip at all. The completely flat surface of the car park and the very similar corners made it hard for drivers to keep their bearings, and they often ended up forgetting, am I at turn 10 or turn 14? Because turns 10 and 14 were identical. All of this in the Nevada desert, with temperatures often reaching above 40 degrees. And as you can imagine, there were frequent mechanical problems, tires that couldn't cope, drivers complaining about the heat and disorientation, dizziness, fatigue, and a track that simply didn't produce good races. So, under a barrage of criticism from the specialist press, with drivers and teams laying into it, Bernie Ecclestone had no other choice. He pulled the plug, and the Caesar Palace Grand Prix lasted just 2 editions. 10 tracks from this calendar that are totally forgettable, but there are certainly others. Can you think of one that's really good today, but in the beginning was actually quite boring? Montreal, for example, which also had different layouts on Notre Dame Island and, over time, was simplified and refined, and today, in my opinion, is one of the best. But my opinion doesn't matter at all. Leave a comment below with 10, or, I don't know, just one that you don't like and that I didn't include in this little list. Who knows, maybe we can do a second edition with another 10 that nobody likes. I tried to put together a selection covering different eras. So that was another episode of Splash and Go on YouTube. I hope you all enjoyed it. Leave a like, it's free, costs nothing, you know, and it really helps the channel. Do me this favor, do us this favor, and leave your comment. This helps the algorithm keep spreading our content across the internet. Can't remember any circuit? No worries, just leave a little emoji. Tell us where you're watching from, anything goes. So you don't miss out on anything we do here, we have notification channels Instagram, Telegram, and WhatsApp. They're showing up here below, and the links are in the description. Last but not least, we have our social media Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and TikTok. We're showing the handles here, and the links are down below as well, where there's content all the time. See you in the next video. Thanks, and a big hug.